Thank you so much for coming here today, Miss Cynthia. Cynthia is with Senior Care Authority, and she's an elder strategist for them. And she's here today to talk to us a little bit more about isolation, especially in the age of COVID, which is so important right now, that we all have faced our own sense of isolation. So I'm going to let Miss Cynthia take over.
Great. Thanks for having me today, Felicia, and all the people who are here. Let me give you just a little brief intro about what my company does and how I work with Felicia and with the Arlington. So what we do is we do strategy work. We work with our clients to help them make life and living choices, and we help to support them in those choices once they make them. So we look at whether they should go to assisted living, independent living, memory care, and we help them find the right place. And we work with people like Felicia to find the exact best place for our client. And then we help them make that move, and we help them do the transition. And that transition may take a long time. We also support the family during all of that. And we build a team. And that team includes ourselves, people like Felicia, again, and the Arlington, as well as maybe an attorney, financial planners, yoga instructors. We have people who will provide CBD if there's a need for that. Anything that you can think of. We have about 45 different areas that we're knowledgeable about where we can find the experts. And so we work in New York City and in Southwest Florida, which means we work with a lot of snowbirds. And I myself am a snowbird. So I come out of New York City and I am located now in Naples, Florida. And that's what we do. And one of the things we did before COVID was we talked a lot with our clients about isolation. And our client is usually the child of an elderly adult. And 9 times out of 10, the adult child would say to us, my mother loves to be at home. She's a homebody. She likes to be there by herself. She enjoys cooking for herself. She enjoys puttering around the house. She loves to be alone. And I believe that she doesn't love to be alone, but that's easier for her to talk about and say, oh, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. We fast forward, and if you had asked me, would you like to have 2 weeks where you didn't have anything to do and you were stuck at home and you just had to stay at home and you got to clean out your closets and you got to watch bad TV, I might have said, that sounds like a vacation. But now that we've been forced to do it, and we're doing it for much longer than just 2 weeks, we're doing it for weeks, and we don't know how much longer we may have to do it, I think we've all become aware of what isolation really means. And isolation doesn't really mean I'm going to putter around the house and I'm going to get to cook when I want to cook and eat what I want to eat and sleep when I want to sleep. That's not what it means. And one of the things that I like to point out is that there's 2 pieces to isolation. There is the physical piece and the mental piece. So, Felicia, you probably see the physical piece and the mental piece in the work that you do.
Yes, we do. We see both sides, and sometimes we are very creative in how to ensure our residents are getting the attention that they need, because being isolated for so long at this point has really been difficult for them and for their loved ones too.
And even, so we could talk about the mental piece. So I'll talk to you about what I see from the mental piece, and then you might just tell us about some things that you all do, I guess, from the mental and the physical. On the mental side, what you see is depression. And I also have to believe I'm the glasses half full, to use a trite phrase. I'm the make lemonade out of lemons type of person. It doesn't mean that in the past 8 to 12 weeks, I haven't had those moments of panic and anxiety and depression. Well, is this what my life is going to look like now forever? Is this going to be, will I ever get to see my friends? Will I ever get to hug my children? Will I ever? That mental piece causes depression and anxiety and panic attacks. And whether we are all isolated, or let's go back to the old world where our loved one is isolated, that panic and anxiety and depression also affects the caregivers. Maybe at one time they weren't isolated, but their loved one was isolated. That mental piece affects them as well. Also, we know that from a physical standpoint, that isolation can cause high blood pressure, cardiac issues. It can cause sleeplessness. It can cause dementia. And we know that that also can happen for the loved one who's taking care of them. So the same way with us as a non-elderly group, there is a lack of, we're becoming, again, the depressed, but we're also, our heart rates may be higher. We may be having aches and pains we've never had before. Now, we get a little panicky and say, oh my gosh, I've got body aches. I must be getting COVID. But those body aches and pains may also just come from being isolated. So, I'd love, Felicia, for you to talk about some things that you all do at the Arlington that answers those questions. And then I can also talk about some more remote ways to do it as well.
So some of the things that we do, especially with our life enrichment department, they are doing a fantastic job right now at making sure our residents are engaged. And what does that mean? We do a ton of Zoom. It could be Zoom bingo. It could be a behind the scenes look at the kitchen, a walkthrough where they get to see how the kitchen operates from the cold food to the hot food. And then also we did one last week on laundry. So they got to do behind the scenes of the dirty linens room and then the clean linens room, and how they are not really, they're very separate, and how they ensure that everyone's using PPE. But the residents join those, especially in independent living. They were very interested in that. And then also on the assisted living side, we do more one-on-one activities. And then we have some group activities that we do, like our morning exercises. Everyone stands outside their room because our hallways are shaped like an L. And they do exercise by stepping out of their door. And at the corner of the L, we have our instructor, so everybody can see the instructor doing the exercise in the morning. And it's just small little ways that we can get everybody together to see their neighbors. Not everybody is technically savvy, so it's a good way for us to have them interact.
So I know I've heard of, and you all probably have maybe done some of these things, I've heard these great stories or seen these great stories about communities that have someone dressed up as the good humor man, and they push an ice cream cart down the hall in the afternoon. And so they get to go out and get their ice cream from the ice cream cart. So that's something that sounds really exciting. There are some communities that have their own TV station now. And so when watching TV, they're watching the activities on TV. There are some that do bingo over the loudspeakers. There are some that do virtual trips, and they say, okay, today we're going to go to New York City, for example, and they have different people who walk down the hall, maybe the aides or the workers at the community walk down the hall with a different picture of some landmark of where they've gone. So there's a lot of those types of things that you all are doing and that are possible that are causing people inside communities to not feel as isolated and help them with the mental piece and the physical piece. One of the things you mentioned was you said, well, some of them are not as technologically savvy. Mm-hmm. And I know that my clients who their parents are at home, they have a concern about that their parents are not psychologically savvy. And there's a number of really great groups that are helping seniors who maybe just have a phone, maybe they just have a smartphone, or their daughter has slipped an iPad under the door for them to be able to use. And there's some really amazing groups out there who are doing work to help the seniors get technologically savvy as much as you can, just through the phone. They're used to understanding what I call the fat thumbs thing, which is what my issue is. They're used to understanding and working with seniors around a lack of technology skills. So I have a couple of locations on my website that can direct you to those technological savants, if you will, who can help the elderly with technology, especially if they're at home. You know, that's a concern when they're at home. And when you think about the technological side, if we can get them up to speed a little bit with the technological side, then there's all sorts of tours and things that they can see. I also have a page that has all sorts of tours and all sorts of different activities that you can hot link to so that people can use those as well. And those are things that the children who are not able to go into the communities as much anymore, they can do those things with their parent remotely and still be a part of that. So the technology piece, I hear that a lot from the kids. Oh, my mother doesn't use a computer. My mother doesn't understand an iPad. But there are ways to get them a little bit more up to speed that we sometimes don't think about.
That's true, and that's so important. It really is. I know a lot of times here we have some folks who call us who would like to see the community, or they want to see their loved one, and maybe mom or dad are not that technically savvy, and we help them a lot with Facebook. And then we also help them with FaceTime and making sure they can get on Zoom. So we have done many, many, many Zoom classes here and gotten everyone set up on their Zoom so they can join meetings and they'll be able to talk to their loved ones, which is important.
You know, we all think maybe it's our age, and plus I'm not sure how any of us of our age would have been able to live through this isolation period, because we are engaged with technology. We've been able to do that. But I have some things that I like to recommend to my clients, especially if their loved one is either at home and didn't quite get in the door to get to assisted living or into a community living area, or if they think they're going to keep them at home, or even if they're already in a community. And one of the things that I like to recommend to them is that they do a family book club. Oh. So they select a book that has to do with something that the grandchildren would enjoy reading, maybe, or listening to be read to, that the grandparent would enjoy and that the parent would enjoy. And they can read these books together, and then they can have a book club together around that book. And so it's a way to build community, because isolation and loneliness is what is really, if you break it down, it's a lack of community, and there's no one there to be in your community. So a simple book club with the grandchildren, the children, and the grandparent is a really good, can be a non-technological way to do things. I've also noticed that, again, a little bit of technology, but maybe not as much as trying to do a Zoom. Netflix now has group movie viewing. Now, Netflix pitches that to single men and women who are virtually dating. That's where their pitch has come along that product that they have developed. But I think it would be perfect for the elderly population who could watch a Netflix with their loved ones who don't live with them. Again, whether they're in a community or whether they're at home isolated.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
It's called, I think it's called Netflix Group. And it's again, they developed it for virtual dating, but so that you can still go to a movie with a date and not see them. But I think of it from the elderly standpoint, and how it would help my clients. What else I like to recommend to my clients are things that are really almost simple and a throwback into an earlier time in our lives when things were not as hectic. And that's something as simple as just sending some flowers. Mm-hmm. Or going in, and if your loved one again is at home, going and planting flowers outside for them to be able to see out the window. So that's just a simple, non-technology, old-fashioned, let's just plant some flowers. Or, heaven forbid, write a letter.
Yeah.
Write a card. There's a ton of cards at the drugstore. And just going back to some things of a simpler time of writing some cards and letters and sending those. Those are some other things that I think help with the isolation piece, whether they're at their home or whether they're in a community like yours, like the Arlington.
That's true. And writing personalized notes is such a lost art, but it's so easy. And it doesn't have to be that detailed or long, but it just means so much more to that special loved one that you took the time out to write them a letter. And it doesn't have to be perfect.
Correct.
It's just a thought that counts.
Right. It may just be a three-liner, or even just a card that just says, I love you. And it's got a funny picture on it. I know that people love that type of thing. So I think that helps. Sending their favorite food. So we know that you all provide these amazing meals for your residents there. but maybe that resident can step back and say, you know, today I'm going to have a hot dog because my daughter sent me a hot dog. I really want to have a Chicago dog, for example. And if that's delivered, then they can have that there. Or again, you know, I refer to people who are also still isolated at home. Those are some different small little things that can be done.
That's amazing. Yes, we have a lot of folks who come and drop off stuff for their loved ones, and they can drop it off right with our security or concierge, and we're able to get that. But it does make it something special for them because their favorite pizza place is still open, or their favorite sandwich place is still open, and I think that's important to try and have some normalcy in your day to day.
I think something else that's important in this discussion, especially for going forward. So I help dozens of people find communities for their parents to live, or I find it for their parents. And I was very concerned when everything shut down. I was concerned that my clients, again, the adult children, would say, I cannot believe that I put my mother there. I cannot believe I put my father there. And now I can't see them. And they're isolated from me. And I made phone calls to all of them and said, I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. And to a person, they said, thank you so much. I'm so glad we got my mother, I got my father, we got our parents in, because there's no way we could have helped them during this time period. And we would have been so worried about them. But we know that because they're in a community that, yes, we can't see them as much as we used to see them physically and touch, but we can see them, you know, in the ways that you all are helping them. And we know that they're safe and that they're fed and that they're well. And no one said to me, I really wish that hadn't happened. I'd rather my parent be with me, living in my home with me and my small children as I teach them school and I work and I care for my mother. No one said that. And so I think it's important to know going forward that again is something that the Arlington and people like yourself can provide, is this ability to not be isolated. I'd like to go live someplace so that I had a reason I could see people down the hall as I was exercising.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And our residents haven't, you know, it's been challenging. I won't say it hasn't for them because it is, and they are not able to eat together and in the dining room is closed, but at the same point in time, it's for their own protection, which they do understand. However, we really have a great group of folks that do live here, and they're being very supportive to one another and keeping their social distancing, which is very important for everyone all the way around. And luckily, we are COVID free, which does make a huge difference for our residents living here and for the family members in the community.
Well, I think that's another important topic that, again, is a little bit off topic from isolation, but is something that I like to make sure that I speak to when I speak, is the difference between an assisted living like the Arlington, and I know you all have skilled nursing there as well, but a standalone nursing home. Because I feel like that we're opening up the newspaper and we're seeing these really terrible stories, but those are not the norm. Those stories they're the headline things. They're not the norm, and they're not what you all have going on there. And they're not what most assisted living communities, whether they're continuing care from one end to the other, or just standalone assisted living or memory care. It's not what we have going on in those situations. Those situations, you all are very prudent in your planning before, during, and after, just like you would be in a hurricane. Mm-hmm. You know, this is going to be my first hurricane season in Florida. But as what I hear is that the pandemic we're in has a lot of similarities to hurricanes. You have to stock up on your food. You can't go out. You're afraid. You have to be careful. So it's very similar. And you all do the same type of pre-planning and post-discussion and things around any type of a disaster, whether it's a pandemic or something else.
That's true, absolutely. And it is hurricane preparedness time, so
yes, it is.
Ready.
So all those cans of beans that I haven't eaten during the pandemic, that I'll just keep them in case I need them during the hurricane.
There you go, absolutely. It never go to waste.
Right. One of the other things I really want to make sure that I reiterate and go back to from the beginning that I've said, this isolation of the elderly doesn't just affect the elderly that are in that situation. It affects the caregivers. So if you have a parent who has some form of dementia, mild or is moving along the continuum, and maybe that's your father, and your mother is caring for your father, and they're both isolated. The father and the mental and physical strain and effects that happen to him are also going to happen to the mother. And it's also going to happen to the children who are calling in to try to do that. The caregivers suffer as much as the individuals do, which is another reason to find the appropriate care and the appropriate help for the resident or the client.
Absolutely, that's true.
And I know you all do some really great jobs with support groups and different things as well in helping the caregiver.
Mm-hmm. And those support groups now are mostly online, which is important. And our fellow community partners, they also are doing those online as well. So you could check onto their websites, and they're doing a really good job with trying to keep connected with everyone virtually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And again, virtually, I think, is what saved most of us during this. However, I am a true believer that this isolation is going to cause us to have a second wave pandemic, which is going to be mental health. And what that's going to mean is we're really going to need to encircle people who are struggling with that and help them, again, have a sense of community. Because as I mentioned earlier, isolation is around loneliness, which is around a lack of a community. And we have to find a way to build that virtually now, but physically when we're allowed to.
That's true. That's very true.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that I can tell you, about isolation? Because I know that's the topic of our conversation. I would also say a couple of things that I'm thinking about when I talked about having the book club. I've also seen people who are playing games online. So they're playing Twister, or they're playing Monopoly, mm-hmm. and they're doing those things through the Zoom ability. I know that a very dear friend of mine who lives close to me, her father is in assisted living in an entirely different state, more in the North, Midwest, and it was his 85th birthday. And she spent a lot of time putting everything together for him, ordering wine that was delivered to him at the assisted living, ordering a cake for him there, calling the assisted living community he lived in, asking them to prepare his favorite meal. She had a dry run with him on Zoom where the community sent someone in to help him get up on Zoom. She did that on a Saturday. His birthday was on a Sunday. And then she had the family in different parts of the country were on Zoom, and they all had their favorite meals, and they all had a glass of wine. And they had dinner with their father and their grandfather, and toasted and sang happy birthday and had him blow out candles. And it was a whole process that included the whole family for days getting ready for the actual birthday party for their father and grandfather. And it was very helpful for him, but it was also very helpful for the family because it gave them something to look at and focus and get ready and do, and kept their minds busy. And so it was really good for everybody to be able to do that little something. And it doesn't have to be a birthday party. Mm-hmm. It can be May Day. It can be Cinco de Mayo. It can be some other type of an event that you can put together, that the families can put together for their loved one.
That's true. And it can be very simple. And sometimes just that phone call, just to say, I'm thinking of you and I just wanted to reach out, means more to the person on the other end of the phone than you think, because you don't know what's going through their mind at that moment.
So do you have any other questions for me around isolation or?
Sure. And I'm just going through, I have a couple of messages, so I'm just going through for some questions.
Okay.
I have a question from a participant. Mom is not technically savvy, so to say. So, how does this Zoom and how does this new technology work for them? Are there other ways that they can connect?
Right. So I think you all are doing things and helping them with Zoom. So if someone was in a community, then you can make sure that your community partners are going in and getting them set up on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, back to the basics, like we had discussed the sending flowers, sending some type of a food product, sending cards and letters, things that are old fashioned. If you go back in and I think about things that I used to do with my grandmother. My grandmother used to send me clothes. So of course that helped my isolation a lot, which I didn't have any. But anyway, it was a good relationship that we had of that she would send me clothes. And I just remember how thrilled I would be when I would get a package. And while we're a society that gets things the minute we need them, it doesn't work that way anymore. It takes weeks to get your toilet paper ordered. But if you can put those things in place where you're sending that, people still get excited about packages. And that's so non-technological. And maybe in that package is the book that we discussed a little bit earlier for the book club. Maybe you actually buy a book and send a book and say, this is the book we're all going to read together. And it just takes away that there is technology because you're going to get on the phone to have the book club. You don't have to get on the Zoom to have the book club.
And there's nothing like a smell of a book, opening a book. You don't get that on your phone or a Kindle.
Or your Kindle, right.
Smell of the page.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
Okay, another question that I have is how do caregivers keep connected? Because it's challenging for them on their side to really hold it together sometimes. They always have to be the glue for everything. So what are some tips for them to not get into that depression and the mental state for isolation?
I think it's about, I'm a list maker. So when this all happened, and I felt like I was going to be here for a long time, even though that people were saying, oh, it's 30 days or it's 15 days or it's 45 days, I like to be in the moment, and I knew that I didn't know how long it was going to be. So I sat and I made a list of all the people I hadn't talked to in a really long time. And these are people I went to high school with, and I've been out of high school for 40 plus years. These were people I had worked with in the past that maybe I had lost touch with them, but I still had some connection with them. And I made that list, and every day I called a couple of those people. And they would say to me, and I FaceTimed them, but I could have just also called them, because they would say, oh, here's my child. I haven't talked to you. She's in kindergarten. I haven't talked to you since she was born. So these were people that were really long time, I don't want to say long lost people, but they were people I hadn't spoken to in a while. And I have a client whose father fell, and we had to get him into a hospital and then into a rehab. And she went to his home and she found the little pieces of paper in his home that had his friends' phone numbers written down on it. And then she sat as a caregiver, but she called those friends to speak to them about what was going on with her father. And it was a way for her to connect with her father's friends, not connecting with her own, but with her father's friends. And her father is very much alive and will be very much alive for a long time. But they had a lot of really great discussions that sometimes you might not have until you see somebody at a memorial service. Yeah. And they told stories about, oh, remember when Dad did this? And remember when he did that? And he had fallen and hurt himself. And so she was able to say, well, this is why he did it, because this is who he is. So that helped her a lot as a caregiver. Mm-hmm. So I just think, again, trying to stay in touch with the community, even if they make fun of you and say, you haven't seen my child since she was a baby and now you're calling me, they're excited to hear from you.
That's true.
So that's a good way to stay in touch.
Those connections, they make more sense than you think they are.
Yes.
Which is nice. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Talk in front of other people. And so they send questions later. They say, oh, I should have asked this question. So I know that if they send it to you, Felicia, because everybody has your contact, you can also go to my webpage, which is www.sca, so like Senior Care Authority, SCA, NY, like New York, FL, like Florida. So SCA, NYFL. There's a number of different places there, but you could also just send me a note and I can direct you, because we have a very robust webpage that has a lot of the things I've talked about here, a lot of resources that you can use, and you can feel free to go there and ask a question, send me an email and ask me a question, or send it through Felicia, and Felicia will get it to me as well.
Absolutely. And I will make sure to follow up with anyone who has any questions. And then also, if you have any questions for us over here at the Arlington, you can always reach me through our Facebook page, on our website, or you can always message me privately as well. And we are at www.arlingtonnaples.org.
Great. Well, thanks again, Felicia, for letting me share this. It's really near and dear to my heart about isolation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for joining us. And thank you for everyone who was able to participate, even though we had a few little technical difficulties.
You'll figure it out. We'll get it all figured out.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.